So I had the pleasure of meeting Janelle in the context of the HEAL K-12 program. And for those of you who don't know, each scholar has 3 mentors. There's a home mentor, a scientific mentor, and a PWLE mentor. The thing we learned in the first year was that our PWLEs enjoyed working with their scholars, but they wanted to work with all the scholars. And so we formed a committee of PWLEs, and the committee wanted to really expand what they could do. They wanted to have a panel, a research review panel. They wanted to have training on how to be part of a study section. They wanted to have a curriculum. And so I shared all this with Laura. And 3 days later, I got an email from Laura saying, we're going to assign you a program officer for this committee. And I thought, uh-oh, are we in trouble? That program officer was Janelle. And it's been anything but a uh-oh experience. Janelle has been fantastic in terms of her passion, her enthusiasm, the ideas that she's brought to our committee. In addition to that, Janelle formed a consortium of PWLE organizations across the country. So our K-12 is part of that. Some of the CTSAs are part of that. There's a number of organizations across the country, also in Canada, UK, and Europe. And Janelle organized kind of this first consortium meeting of all these. And it was fantastic, and the ability to see what other people were doing, to learn from each other, and to have ideas to share. Unfortunately, after that first meeting, some things happened at NIH. And the future of that consortium was in question at some point, but they decided to continue on. So they had their second meeting, and I got to share with you that when you popped up on that Zoom, it was a wonderful experience. Very, everyone kind of felt relieved. We didn't know if we'd ever see you again. And your presence was inspiring for that. And this committee has continued on. So, I think the award that we're having for you is really for everything you've done in the past, but are continuing to do, and for things you'll be doing in the future. So, thank you.
So I'm trying to decide whether to do thank you now or the end, because I will cry. So I might just save some thank yous to the end and then go blubber off into the distance. But I will just say one thank you to the conference organizers, because part of the reason why I moved over from academia over to the NIH was because I really wanted to build up public trust in pain research and embed health equity into everything that pain research was doing. And so part of that was building relationships and communicating science more in plain language and thinking about how we could share beyond the lab and really get pain research out there. And this is something, clearly, I'm not the only one who's interested in. We've heard about it on the different panels. And so I'm hoping that some of these tips and tricks will maybe make the process a little bit easier for those who are newer to thinking about plain language communication. And so this is not just unique to people with lived experience. I want you all to take a second to think about whether you've ever left a science talk thinking, what was that even about? And if you have said yes to that question, how that talk made you feel in like 3 to 5 words in your head. So for me, the answer is absolutely yes, and multiple times. And it made me feel some combination of dumb or frustrated, bored, not interested, and very unfortunately not more informed when I left than when I came in. And this was so much so that when I was a postdoc, I was attending grand rounds and I had some of the most brilliant scientists presenting, and I felt like I just couldn't understand what their talks were saying, and I couldn't learn, and it went way over my head. So I started doing my own sort of self-education on the basic neuroscience of pain to, rather than sit in these emotions, try to do something about it. And since I was learning myself, I figured I would try to broaden this out to just people broadly. Found a social media science communicator community, and my brain works in mysterious ways. And so what that led to was a science communication account where sushi was my visual medium, because obviously, why not use sushi to explain neuroscience? But of course, I am a trained scientist, and so my past writing has been, and my past presentations have also been undecipherable at some points, even that word undecipherable right there. So this is an excerpt from just like one of my papers that, I was really proud of course, when I wrote. Second, mesocortical limbic PFC regions have regulatory effects on aspects of the NAC via glutamatergic neurons and help encode stimulus valence for further processing. Aberrant function among this system can result in emotion dysregulation and anhedonia in individuals with MDD. And so if you had trouble reading that, it's not just you. I ran it through a reading calculator, and it is in fact a grade 18, very difficult to read sentence or couple of sentences. And so I know I'm not the only one who does this, and why do we do it? For a lot of different reasons. One, it's what we were taught. It's what we see from a lot of others in the field, especially the people who we respect most. It's also a factor of thinking about who's in the audience, and a lot of times we think that the people in the audience have the same level of background and knowledge that we do. There's also some personal features, right? We want to be respected, and we want to sound like we are educated and we know what we're talking about. But then there's also the practical reasons of we just want to use those right terms. But the problem with this is it can limit who can understand our science, and that means it limits how the research gets used and then how we have progress and care. So what we can do instead is think about using plain language communication. And this is a form of communication that's clear and accurate. It's really focused on who's in your audience. It's limiting jargon, or if you have to use jargon, explaining it clearly, and then spotlighting those key points. It's not just dumbing down information, and I know, Tom, earlier you said dumb things down, and I'll give you a different way of thinking about it maybe in a second. It's also not about just kind of taking all of the information, writing it in technical jargon, and then translating in one sentence at the end what you mean. And it's not only focused on removing formal words. So we can think about it not as dumbing down information, but opening up who our information can reach and who it's meaningful to. So just to give you a rewrite of that couple of sentences, so this is thinking about an audience that includes both technical, sort of people who have that background, but then people who are non-scientists or not formally trained as scientists. So second, brain areas that play a big role in thinking and decision-making send signals to the brain's reward center. These signals are sent through chemical messengers that tell the brain's reward center to be more active. The activity helps a person decide if something feels good or bad. And when the system isn't working as expected, it can make it harder for people with depression to manage emotions or feel pleasure. So running this one through the reading calculator, it's a grade 8 plain English. So why should we use plain language? First, it can help everyone, or at least most people, understand what you're talking about. And that's not just, thinking about the general public or people without a technical background. If you're sitting in a study section with scientists from different backgrounds, they probably don't have that, foundation that you have from your area of science. And so it just helps to communicate both to peers, it helps to communicate to the public, and it helps to communicate just broadly. And so when people can get the message directly from us instead of from third parties, that helps build trust in science, and it fights misinformation. So we've been talking a lot about how social media can have a lot of misinformation. So what if that information just came directly from the source instead? And that way, it makes the best use of your science because it's actually getting into the hands of the people who need it most. And so it makes the best use of your time. So I pose the question to all of you of, can we change the culture in pain research? This is something that when I was at NIH, I was really, really hoping to do. I had like big visions of developing plain language communication toolkits and all of these things that, unfortunately got cut too short. But there's still the possibility of, can we change the culture in pain research? And from what I've heard from everyone today here at this conference, there's an interest in this. And so maybe that answer is yes. And so you might be wondering, okay, I'm on board, where can I start and where can I go? So this is just a little roadmap that is sort of the low-hanging fruit all the way to aspirational, what we might hope to do in the future. So the lowest hanging fruit is to use common terms. So instead of utilize, use. Facilitate, help. Optimal, best. Exacerbate, worsen. Conducted a study, did a study. Then the next step is to limit jargon. This one is a little bit harder because we're so set in our terms that we've learned, and a lot of the times limiting jargon means you're going to have to use more words to explain things. But just some examples here. Instead of an analgesic, a pain medicine. Non-pharmacologic, non-drug. Novel therapeutics, new treatments. Phenotypic characteristics, visible trait. Localized or focal in one area or spot. Of course, like I mentioned before, jargon sometimes is just, you have to use it, but if you do need to use it, make sure you're clearly defining the term up front and in a way that people can easily go back and find what that meaning is. And also trying to limit your use of acronyms unless they're very, very common. So those very common acronyms will be things like the US. Pretty much everyone is going to know what the US refers to. FAQ, that's another common acronym that most people in the public will know. MRI, even more commonly now, is something that people will know. There are some acronyms that when you use them, they can mean different things to different people. So ASL might mean arterial spin labeling to one person and then American Sign Language to another person. So that can be confusing when you're reading a paper referencing ASL and you're thinking you're talking about arterial spin labeling and someone else is thinking it's American Sign Language. Another example is ACE for angiotensin converting enzyme versus adverse childhood events. There are also some jargony acronyms, so things like fMRI that goes more into all of a sudden the jargon space, and so using functional MRI instead. Conflict of interest might also be something that a lot of people don't know. And then one that I've heard from just grant writing courses and good practices is limiting acronyms that are just made up for one study, because a lot of times people aren't familiar with that. And so you're scanning through a grant trying to read really quickly, but you have to keep finding, what was that acronym? What does this even refer to? That just takes more time for the reader and distracts away from the science that you're trying to explain. So just want to share a couple of resources that might help to make this a little bit easier. So first, from the CDC, there's this Everyday Words for Public Health Communication. It's not fully comprehensive, doesn't have all of the words that we would use in science or in pain science, but it's at least a helpful place to start. And then I created a couple of Google Docs just from things I've heard even at this meeting or things that I'm used to reading in papers. So one is for common terms, so those more sort of utilized to use, and then one is for non-jargon terms. And I'm more than open to additional suggestions. So if you have any other words that you would like to see in sort of plain language, feel free to email me and I can add to this document since it's a living document. So then moving beyond just sort of changing the terms is thinking about changing your story's structure. And this was something that was brought up on the panel of people with lived experience earlier today. So thinking about what will your audience find most interesting. The way that a lot of scientists are trained is you write the background, the methods, the results, and the discussion. But that's not always what people want to hear, especially people who don't have that same, scientific training where they're used to seeing it laid out that way. Another way to think about it is maybe talking first about what did the study look at and why? What were the main findings in the limitations that were present in the study? And then going into, okay, what were those technical methods? What were the actual results? And then any additional discussion. I don't have time to go into an actual example of this, but I did create like a mock PowerPoint that has sort of first the slides laid out as we would think in technical language and in the sort of formal structure, and then a slide set that transitions into what you might potentially use if you're changing the structure of your story and trying to use plain language instead. So I'll run through a few other tips. So one is to consider putting your technical information into a Google document and including the QR code on a slide or poster. So just like I did on the past couple of slides, is you can just link out to that technical information. So especially if you're in a mixed audience where it's people with lived experience, it's researchers, it's healthcare providers, people from different research training backgrounds, you might just link all that technical information that the people in your field specifically would want to know in a different area. Another thing is to run your text on slides through AI and ask it to give you feedback or suggestions. So an example prompt that you can give AI is something like, I'm presenting about a health condition to an audience that includes a mix of scientists and people without formal science training. The latter live with a health condition. On a scale of 0 to 10, because we all love numbers as quantitative scientists, how well do you think everyone in the audience will be able to understand? Where can I add plain language to make it clearer? And then, is anything stigmatizing? One thing I will say about that latter piece, and it goes into the roadmap of where we can sort of grow into, is AI, of course, is not a human. And so partnering with people with lived experience is really the best way to make sure your messaging is not stigmatizing and is using the best plain language possible. So then I input my text, and then this was ChatGPT, gives me my nice number rating so I can sort of quantify as I make changes how things improve. And then also because it is maybe like a therapist in another life, it gives you a therapist sandwich of what's working well, what you need to improve, and then ends with great job. Some other tips are to simplify your numbers where possible. So instead of saying 19.6% of people have chronic pain, 1 in 5 people, using comparisons or metaphors can also be helpful. And then to Tom Norris's point about posters, posters, of course, are something that we're so used to as scientists of seeing a certain structure in a certain way, but there are ways that we can start to think about how to present information in a new way so that your main message is upfront, the thing that attracts people's attention, and then sort of all those details are still in there, but just in a separate place where people can access it on their own time. And so an example of this has been the Better Poster template. MIT came out with an even better poster template, and so the QR code there links to some examples of potentially different layouts and forms that you can use. Moving along on our roadmap, the sort of next place you might grow into is to engage people with lived experience in your messaging and communications. And if you think about it, all of pain research is designed for people with lived experience, and this includes those living with pain, their caregivers, and their communities. And so let them tell you what they want to know about your study and how the messaging that you're giving, how it sits with them, and is there a way that you might be missing out on some messaging? So it's really helpful to create those partnerships, ideally engaging them early and often throughout the study, but in the messaging as well as another helpful place. And then finally, what would be sort of the amazing place we could all get to is just like Lakia and Todd did earlier, is co-presenting with people with lived experience. And so what this does is it combines lived experience and research evidence together. It shares the stage with those end users of the research and the people who the research is impacting. And as Chris Beasley said in the K-12 symposium on Monday, people with lived experience are often the trusted messengers for their community. And so having a trusted messenger to co-present the information is really important for just continuing to build trust in pain science. I'll share a couple of additional resources in case you're interested in learning more and further developing your skills. And so one is this plain language guide from the NIH. Another is a plain language checklist from plainlanguage.gov. And then that calculator that I referenced earlier for readability, there is a website that has the calculator, but it's also a feature in Word, so it should be something, if you look at the document stats tab, you should be able to get that from there. And I'll say my really quick thank yous, which are to Laura Wadner, who has been just the most amazing supervisor and mentor and person to encourage me in all that I love about pain research and engaging people with lived experience in health equity. To Linda Porter, who was totally on board to allow me to run with ideas and create partnerships with people and infrastructure in our office, and just the most supportive boss you could hope for. To Chris and Tom and Eden and Aaron and all the other people with lived experience who I've had the honor to partner with. I've learned so much from you. And to all of you who just thank you for continuing to move forward the torch of pain research, and I can't wait to read what you all write, hopefully in plain language.
Up here, the three of you, this is a tribute to the entire Office of Pain Policy.